Constitution is in actual operation. Everything appears to promise that it will last. But in this world, nothing is certain but death and taxes.
Taxes. Just as certain today as they were in Ben Franklin's time. They're a very real and very important part of our economic lives. But in an effort to tax more fairly and equitably, our tax system and our tax forms have become more complex and sophisticated. As a result, the average taxpayer is honestly confused, often bewildered. We think it's high time for some straightforward, simple answers. Answers to questions like,
what I'd like to know is, why do we pay so many taxes? I mean, where do they all come from? I mean, it seems like we pay a tax on everything. The house and the car, and food and clothes, and even the dog. And on top of everything else, income tax. Well, I'll tell you one thing. You're lucky it's me and not Harry you're talking to. You mentioned taxes to Harry. That's my husband. And, well, he just goes through the roof. Really. Mark Twain knew what he was talking about when he said the only sure things are death and taxes.
Mark Twain most certainly did not say that. I did. That is, I wrote it back.
Our tax heritage dates back to the period before the Revolutionary War. Americans were already paying excise taxes, customs on imported goods. And one of the most unpopular of these was the tea tax. Among a people so opposed to taxation, with or without representation, it's not surprising that a great deal of Yankee ingenuity was devoted to avoiding or at least minimizing taxes. 1794. In opposition to the first Internal Revenue Act, which imposed excise taxes on whiskey, snuff, sugar, slaves, houses, and land, citizens staged the Whiskey Rebellion. At least one tax collector was tarred and feathered. And according to some tax authorities, the Internal Revenue Service has never really forgiven us. 1862. To underwrite the mounting costs of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln signed the bill establishing America's first actual income tax. As it turned out, it confused even him. After his death, President Lincoln's estate filed a claim for a refund of $1,279.15. He'd overpaid his income taxes. 1863 to 1872, the money poured in. By 1872, our government found itself with all the income that it required. So, with excise taxes and import duties bringing in adequate revenue to operate the peacetime government, the income tax was eliminated. Most people thought forever. In 1894, it was put into effect once again, but lasted only until the following year when it was declared unconstitutional. However, by 1913, America was expanding, and expansion was expensive. there were strong pressures for a new income tax, but a tax based on the ability to pay. So the income tax was brought out of mothballs, dusted off, and again made a part of the American scene. A permanent part. In 1913, only 1 out of every 271 Americans earned enough money to pay income tax. For that reason, the income tax was one of our earliest status symbols. In 1917, America entered World War I, and emergency taxes brought several additional million Americans into our tax-paying minority. Those wartime taxes ranged from 6% to 77%. The fiscal year of 1918 was the first time that Internal Revenue collections went over the billion-dollar mark. It never went below that level again. Before the end of World War I, a family man with an enormous income for that time of $10,000 was paying about $782 a year in income taxes. During the 1920s, a peacetime period, income taxes decreased 5 times. The man who paid $782 a few years earlier now paid only about $40 or less on the same income. In the mid-30s, taxes rose again. By 1939, 1 in every 32 Americans was paying income tax, but that still included only our wealthier citizens. Even then, the income tax form represented a source of confusion.
I hate to ask y'all again, but would you mind terribly taking another look at my phone?
During World War II, Congress gave us withholding tax. This new pay-as-you-go plan not only provided urgently needed revenue a year earlier, it also reduced the problem of delinquent tax bills. 1945, income taxes averaged $136 for every man, woman, and child in the United States. After World War II, taxes were cut twice. This did not last long, however. Foreign aid, federal highway development, housing, urban renewal, military spending, and space programs increased our income taxes until, by the end of the Korean conflict, they averaged $197 for every man, woman, and child in the United States. By 1967, that figure had risen to $343. So that today, the Internal Revenue Service is by far the world's largest and most efficient collection agency. So efficient that it costs the IRS only 1/2 cent for every dollar it collects.
Efficient? That shows you how much you young fellers know about that infernal revenue outfit. Take last year. Golly, I had me $6 cash money a-coming back. And I should have had it back by return mail. But you know how long I had to wait? 3 whole weeks. That's how long. Ain't no use belly aching, though. Like old Cal Coolidge said, there's only 2 things in life that folks can count on. And that's death and taxes.
Cal Coolidge, nothing. I was the one who said that.
During one 2-week period alone, the 2 weeks prior to April 15th, over 30 million individual tax returns arrive at IRS for processing. One of them may be yours. Just in case you may have overpaid your income tax, it might be reassuring to learn that those forms requesting a refund do have priority. If your return is filed on or before April 15th, your refund check must be sent out within 45 days of the filing deadline, or the IRS must pay you 6% interest on your refund. Basically, here's what's involved in processing a return. First, checks and money orders are removed and the amount of payment is credited to the taxpayer. A return is then screened to catch obvious errors, returns that are incomplete, unsigned, or just plain unreadable. These may be sent back immediately to the taxpayer, or the examiner may contact him to obtain the missing information. For several years now, computers have done the job of verification. That is, checking taxpayers' arithmetic and adjustments.
Verification by computer?
Don't be silly. I'm sure the computers are adequate for a few elementary functions, but... Louise, I asked you to get rid of that chewing gum. But expecting a machine to check income tax returns, detect irregularities, and take appropriate action, why, it's ridiculous. Particularly when you're dealing with the many complex variables that'll occur in the millions of different returns. You can't possibly be certain of complete accuracy. But then, I suppose, as Robert Browning so aptly expressed it, alas, the only certainties in life are death and taxes.
My good woman, Robert Browning, did not say a thing about death and taxes.
Your return is prepared for the computer by first editing and coding each major item. This information is transferred from the individual tax forms to perforated cards. After numerous validity checks, these cards go into a tape drive machine that processes this information at about 650 cards per minute. This condenses all the data contained in a typical return to about a quarter inch of dots. A sharp-eyed digital computer then studies the data for errors and irregularities and finds them in about 1 out of every 30 returns. Any irregularities are identified and quickly corrected. Eventually, all reels of tentatively approved tape are air expressed to the National Computer Center, Martinsburg, West Virginia. The Martinsburg Monster, an unofficial name but fitting name for a giant computer like this one. Its job is to electronically and automatically analyze data from your return, compare it with prior returns, and designate whether you have a valid refund, if you should be notified for further inquiry, or that no additional action need be taken. In this way, through automatic data processing, we've modernized our system of tax collection and made it more precise. What's more important, through visual and electronic verification, each return is thoroughly checked, and the chances of any irregularities slipping by unnoticed is, practically speaking, almost zero.
Yeah, no sense trying to fool the machines. You can't beat the system.
That's right. More than ever before, the responsibility is on the individual taxpayer to make his returns complete and accurate.
Okay, but what bothers me is how's a guy supposed to know if he's doing the right thing? I mean, with something like taxes, you gotta be sure. I guess it's like Will Rogers said, nothing's sure, except death and taxes.
No, I said it.
With current tax laws, regulations, and court decisions filling several volumes, it's not surprising that the taxpayer has questions about interpretation of instructions. What claims may or may not cause a computer to raise an electronic eyebrow? What deductions are acceptable and what ones are not? What is and what isn't a legitimate business expense? Like every other aspect of our economy, tax laws and interpretation change from time to time. So even if the taxpayer spends the time and effort required to become a do-it-yourself tax expert, he'll have to go through the same process again the very next year. Nevertheless, the responsibility of reporting income and deductions accurately and honestly rests with the individual taxpayer. And compliance with our income tax laws is an obligation from which no American is exempt.
Look, I dig your act, man, but try and see this tax scene my way, huh? I'm not married, no house, no kids, no hang-ups, you dig? But still, I have to pay as much in my income tax as my boss does. And why? Because he's a guy with a split-level mortgage and wall-to-wall dependents. Look, that guy drags down nearly twice the bread that I make, but yet I'm the cat that gets stuck with the king-size taxes. Now, you tell me why. Look, that guy, Confucius, he just wasn't whistling off key when he said, the only sure hang-ups in life are death and taxes. You know what I mean?
Young man, that was not Confucius.
Under normal conditions, a single man does not pay twice the rate of a married man. But taxation based on the ability to pay is a firmly established principle of our tax system. Concessions are made to the family man. For example, the split income or joint return provision, which allows married couples to split their earnings. Provisions are available for taxpayers in different circumstances, with different occupations, having different incomes, and of different ages. There are others, many others. There are so many, in fact, that many get overlooked at tax time. Millions of people overlook perfectly legal deductions that would greatly reduce the amount of their income taxes. Granted, our income tax forms are somewhat lengthy and complicated, and this is why millions of Americans in all walks of life turn to tax experts. A good, reliable taxman can save the taxpayer a good deal of money, sometimes a lot of money. And what's more important, he can prevent possible trouble from Uncle Sam. Now, as I was saying, right here is what caused your income taxes to increase so much for this past year. You see, when you sold the movie rights to Poor Richard's Almanac, you moved up into this higher tax bracket. And because of a new tax ruling, however...
Perhaps if we doubled the deduction for quill pens.
I really wouldn't advise that. After all, you yourself once wrote...
Yes?
The income tax has made more liars out of Americans than golf.
No, no, no. Will Rogers said that. What I said was, in this world, nothing is certain but death.